50.
But
No,
I'm
we can go back
told.
to 25.
No, we go back to 19. We're saying 100 years. So our math has betrayed us.
No,
we're going to go back
okay,
from
yeah.
to
Yeah.
19.
So really,
1919.
so from 50 to 1919,
That's right.
30 years. That's not bad.
It's 31.
That's a shit ton
Math.
of history right there.
Yeah.
So you want to start on the front end or the back end?
I will tell you what. I'll take either end. I've had
No,
fun.
that's what I hear.
I'll have
That's
fun
what I
with
hear.
both.
Oh, listen up, ladies.
It's because I'm
James Reeves Facebook.
.net. I don't know what. I don't know what that. .org. I now have an org. I teach.
He'll take it from either end, ladies.
Listening to Three Bourbons In. 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 Cheers.
All right, go ahead.
All right.
I'm giving you permission to speak. Go right ahead.
Welcome. Yeah, fuck you too. Not you, dear listener. I'm telling James to fuck off
He
because
actually
he's being
used
an ass.
he used the word listener as a singular form.
Well, because I think there's only one
I
left.
think there is one. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
If that's what you want to call us, we'll call you anything. Just keep listening.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
So, welcome to Slightly Uncomfortable. Tonight,
Three bourbons in.
it is a Three Bourbons In. It is a
Bourbons In.
Three Bourbons In, and we're about there. Sooner or later. What are we drinking, James?
Well, Root was kind enough to bring some Wild Turkey Rye. I had never had it before this evening, and I'm a fan. It's rarely would I ever look to Root to be a resource for new whiskey information.
The bringer of Stonehammer.
He has truly evolved. But this is the Wild Turkey, just straight rye whiskey, and it's 81 proof. Don't know how long it's aged, but it's surprisingly smooth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm drinking mine on the rocks. I think my next pour I'm going to do it neat to see what the difference is there.
You know, James said it earlier tonight before we kicked off the show here. Rye gets a bad beat, I think. When you start talking about rye whiskey, people start thinking about that bite and the burn and the harsh and all that stuff. There is nothing like that here. There's a little bit of a warm after 20, 30 seconds that builds out. I think I prefer it neat, and James is going to try to hear neat in a second.
Yep.
I think it's a little bit more complex.
When you drink it neat, well, most any whiskeys will be.
Right.
Because you're not watering the flavor down with ice.
And
but I mean, a lot of people don't get that if it's not a wheated bourbon, it's a rye bourbon.
Right.
People don't realize that, because you hear about the high rise and stuff. But if it's not wheated, that third grain's going to be rye.
As well it should be.
Right. So the reputation that rye gets by being spicy and hot and peppery and all that shit, that's if it's handled in a way that causes those flavors to come out. Now, some people enjoy that Kentucky hug that rye gives you if it's aggressive, and some people don't. It just depends on. I mean, Evan Williams is a rye bourbon, the same as Booker's.
Right.
And you get two totally different abusive natures in those two.
I'm a big fan of Booker's,
God,
but I can't drink it like I could drink this stuff.
It's a rite of passage. So, what is this Three Bourbon Inn going to be about tonight? Root is the producer, and
I know, right?
I'm flying co-captain here.
I came down here in the bunker, rewired everything because it's my show. Damn it! It's my show.
He put some Velcro on some wires.
I color coded all the wires,
and
now
I'm
we know where
colorblind.
everybody
And I'm
is on the
colorblind,
mixer.
so it does
and
nothing
he's
for me.
colorblind, of
That
course
does
he is.
nothing for me.
So what are we talking about? This is what we're talking about. Everybody knows from all the shows that I'm the history guy. Love history, and a couple of weeks ago, the crew here, we were talking about some show ideas, and somebody came up with the idea of looking back 20 years and 25 years, I think it was. Maybe it was 50
Actually,
years.
we
It
were
was
talking
50.
about looking ahead 25.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's because Root listens so well.
Yes, I do, because I pay no attention to bullshit.
He doesn't. He doesn't.
But the thought hit me that 50 years from now is not going to be that much change difference.
I'm looking for my jetpack
than
at some
50
fucking point.
Yeah, right. Because we were promised that 50 years ago.
In the 60s.
Right.
Like the Jetsons.
Exactly. and it's nowhere to be found.
No.
And I suggested during that conversation we needed to push it out a little bit further, and
Right.
and that's when it hit me. Let's look at 100 years ago. We can either start today and work backwards, or start from 1919 and work forwards. Let's take it in 25-year increments.
Sure.
Generation, if you will, and just see where we go. And so today, I was thinking we'll start today and take a look at what's going on, right?
So 25 years from today would be
No, we're going backwards.
backwards. 25 years backwards would be, what's the math on that? That'd be,
Don't make me think. So, so it's going to be 95.
we've seen the folly in this.
Yes. Let's call it from today to the early 90s.
All right.
And
Are we talking about things that pop in our mind about
Sure,
that
just-
are unique about these 25 years that we
yeah,
were covering? All
and,
right.
and not really personal, and unless that personal experience is part of a larger thing.
Got an aggressive bowel movement in October of
I
last
see.
year.
That's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that no.
It really left a mark.
Oh God.
All right.
Okay, so with that, so
All right. So you go first.
all right, so the last 25 years, the political nonsense has become a sport. It's a team sport, and I don't care what team you're on.
Them against us.
It's them against us, and then all them against us in some cases, and a lot of people are tuning out. A lot of people are, in my opinion, missing the larger arguments because of the team sport mentality.
They're
Nobody,
getting lost in the noise.
right? They don't want to advance a policy so much as beating the other guy.
Well, and I've said, and especially I think it's becoming more prevalent as we move along, that we have politicians that are beautiful at creating storms.
Yeah.
Storms of rhetoric, storms of minutia, storms of irrational things that are said, bantering back and forth. And anytime there's a storm going on, it's difficult to notice one lightning strike.
Yep.
And what we're missing is the little lightning strikes behind the scenes
Mm-hmm.
that are cause these storms not to even matter at the end of the day because
Exactly.
they've laid a foundation of shit that we haven't even paid attention to.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at the bullet points that are on Yahoo and on CNN and on Fox.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what,
it.
and you know what? I think we all fall victim to it.
Yeah.
And I think, Root comes from a different political perspective than I do, but I think we would both agree that it's a shit show.
Absolutely.
And both parties that are represented by our mindset
Well,
are still not doing the things that we think that could
Yeah.
be progressing into a better path.
absolutely, and we're not going to go too far down this political rabbit hole,
No.
but I can think of two active parties that are nationally held that actually mean what they say. One is the Socialist Workers Party, and the other one's the Green Party. Both of those folks, they absolutely mean what they say from the top all the way down. I'm a member of the Libertarian Party. I can think of one person, and the name's unimportant because that's not what the show's about. I can think of one person in the entirety, two people in the entirety of libertarian politics that I think means what they say.
Well, it harkens me back to a local politician that we've known for years, Gatewood Galbraith. To me, he was a local Lexington lawyer, and his big thing was legalization of marijuana.
Yeah.
But he was a brilliant. I would say he was probably a bit more of a liberal-minded politician, but nonetheless, he was very grassroots. Mm-hmm. And I always said he was the most honest politician I ever saw.
Yep.
Because he had the money, he had the intelligence, he had the swagger to have won political office, but he would not back away from his principles.
Yep.
That saying legalization of marijuana in the state of Kentucky would have changed the whole dynamic.
Yep, absolutely.
And it still stands true today. He's passed, God rest his soul. But now you're seeing people starting to champion what he was talking about in the 80s and 90s.
Exactly. He wrote a book called The Last Free Man in America, and I encourage people to go out there and check it out. He was a libertarian at heart.
Yeah, I mean, he was also just a trailblazer.
Absolutely.
And he was the guy standing in the middle of an intersection,
Waving that sign.
Yeah, so it was just so. All right, so Paul.
So that that's the political mess.
But I think I can, I would agree 100% with that. The first thing I'm going to mention in the last 25 years is social media. I think what we're seeing now with social media is driving the ships of everything else we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Because now we're seeing, when you're talking about your political part, it's being driven via social media, through Twitter and through
Absolutely.
Facebook. And you're seeing people's opinions being swayed by what they read as pop-ups on social media. And we knew that even back in the days of Clinton and Reagan, that people believed a lot of things that they saw on TV.
Right.
That one thing they saw on TV, that's what they believed. Mm-hmm. Now that is being catapulted even more so in today's climate, is what they read on social media, even though it may not be from a credible source, if there is such a thing anymore.
Right.
But they're going to believe that, all right, Trump colluded with the Russians. Well, he must be terrible.
Right. Yeah.
Or he must be guilty, or he must be innocent. And 9 times out of 10, the person that wrote that has no idea of any validity, because the news that we see today, they want to be first. They don't want to be right.
Right. And when things like Twitter and even
The Twitter and the Book of Faces.
the Twitter. Let me see. We're going back to the early '90s, right? So
AOL.
Yeah. CompuServe.
Yeah.
Prodigy. All of those trailblazing online services.
MySpace.
Oh God. Never mention MySpace.
Well, I mean,
again.
but that was the
foundation.
the foundation of Facebook.
It was. Zuck may disagree, but it is the fact.
Absolutely.
It is the fact.
And I think what got MySpace started was music.
Oh yeah.
And then, of course, pedophiles. And then it moved on to the social media of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the other stuff that we've got going on now.
All those instant messaging outfits, and at the time it was still competing with dial-up bulletin board systems,
Right.
and all of that. But what happened there, I think, is some of those users of those platforms developed a name for themselves, and then other people tried to emulate that, right? I did not, but
Root. Root's his fucking name, but he never did anything online or nothing.
I've done some things, but there's a reason I'm Root. But
He actually blushed.
Well,
There was blushing. It doesn't play well on the podcast, but that may be the first time that
there's
he's
a lot of
blushed.
stories. There's a lot of stories. But I think the reason that social media today, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, all these things have such a profound impact on folks is, back in the day, that's how we got news out. Mm-hmm. And that was that alternative media, because back in the day, again, that's when we started to see these cracks emerging in the big media corporate thing, because somebody local saw something happen. Then they saw it reported on CBS News, completely different, and they go to MySpace, or they go to their BBS of choice, or they go to Prodigy or AOL or any of these other message form kind of deals, and they say, no, this is what really happened.
And I think at first that was the real truth coming out. Mm-hmm. And we welcomed that, and it was genuine, and it was raw. And people like raw honesty.
We hoped.
Well, and that was the issue.
That it was
I think initially it was because people felt as though such a disconnect between what was being uttered on the national media and what was actually being happening on boots on the ground.
And but if that wasn't what actually happened, we were all on an equal playing field.
Yeah.
So then that
Every
person's
idiot had a
neighbor
voice.
could come out. Yeah.
Every idiot had a voice. It's the equivalent of interviewing a tornado victim in eastern or western Kentucky and to hearing their account
Right.
of that tornado.
Sound like a freight train.
Yeah, there ain't no fucking freight train anywhere in eastern Kentucky where this sumbitch lives. Like he knows what a damn freight train sounds like.
It's probably sound like a coal train.
Right,
to
right,
him.
yeah. So, sounds like a Lear jet. Never fucking seen an airport, sir.
Sound like the power up of a nuclear power
It'd
plant.
been better off. He goes, sounds like a John boat that has got a bad carburetor.
Stuck on a log.
But
So yeah, so
social media now, I think it's almost like we've pet and we fed that dog, and now it's grown too big for us to handle.
I don't think it has. I think the impact from social media will be seen in this next 25 years.
My issue with social media is this, and I think
Well, no, it happened in this 25 years actually.
I think this is the bigger issue that I'm having going, if we were talking about going forward,
Okay.
and we'll talk about this on a later podcast, is just people's privacy. And I think that is people are sharing way more on social media because they feel as though they're being social. You're at a party, and people are sharing stories, and all of a sudden you start sharing a story that in hindsight you'd think about and go, I probably shouldn't have said that to that group. But you're empowered by being part of a group. I don't want to say mob mentality, but it's in a pleasant, welcoming way that you're in a platform that you're like, hey, this is no problem. Now we have Alexa devices that we speak into. Root and I was speaking earlier, and my phone picked up on something that we said and started talking back to us.
Yep.
So, I mean, in the 60s, we were worried about wiretaps, and now we're going, wiretap, what's the weather going to be tomorrow? So we really evolved to that.
My Android device has never done that. I just want to say that.
It's just listening and shuts up. It's like a good woman. Oh,
my God!
that was something Lloyd. I'm sorry, that's something Lloyd would have said. I said that in memory of Lloyd, like he passed.
Honey, I'll be home in a minute.
All right. So what's your second thing?
So, well, I wanted to mention about social media, and
Great minds.
This is a positive thing. I think the 2000 election, the much ballyhooed 2000 election, Bush v. Gore, and then the court cases that evolved from that. There was a news personality that had his career destroyed because of a blogger. Dan Rather issued that Texas National Guard memo, and Charles Johnson, little did anybody know, he ran this blog. Well, everybody knew this part, but
I've never heard of him.
Yeah, well,
I'm just.
but
In your world,
but the fallout.
Yes.
Right. Charles Johnson ran this blog called Little Green Footballs. It was a WordPress thing, and he was witty and fun to read.
Except for that title.
Well,
Just saying, that's not witty or fun.
I'm sure there's a story there too, because Charles was, is kind of quirky.
God
like
rest
that.
his soul.
No, he's still around.
Or maybe not.
But little did anybody know that this guy had apparently a typewriter fixation. He loved old typesetting. He got a hold of that memo because Dan Rather, it was everywhere, and he started comparing the typeset on it. And he discovered that there is no way that memo was written at the era that George Bush would have entered the National Guard. That destroyed Dan Rather. And it could very well have destroyed CBS, the CBS News division.
Right.
It certainly started to turn that tide of
Not trusting the media.
of not trusting
Honestly,
the media.
and I think that's what we've seen used and abused since.
Right.
Because we said earlier, there's no trust in news sources.
Right.
And there just simply isn't. I mean, I know a lot of people that watch the BBC to get United States news.
right. Al Jazeera
Yeah.
to get U.S. news.
I'm like, a couple hundred years ago, we left them some bitches.
We kicked their ass.
So I'm like, now we're trusting them for our news.
Right.
Because I tell you what, if somebody has a British accent, I trust them already.
Hello.
I know they're going to be able to talk to me about food and music. So,
But they do have bad teeth.
that horrible high, and they make my teeth make me feel so much better about my teeth.
Oh my God, I just went there too.
All right, so I'm going to do a darker side, and
Let's have it.
unfortunately, is in the
last one, we'll move on.
In the last 25 years, the thing that has bothered me the most is the mass shootings, the school shootings, the mass shootings. You know, in Obama's 8 years, no sitting president for 2 terms had ever dealt with that many mass shootings. And now, through President Trump's first 2 years, he's on a record pace even to surpass Barack Obama's tenure. And I'm not going to sit here and say I've got a fix for it. That's not what this show's about.
Right.
Because honestly, I don't. I don't have a fix for it. But I think that's the most troubling thing that I can recall in the last 25 years is that now when one of these things pop up on the news, we forget about it by the next day.
Yeah, it's become common.
You know, and it's expected. It's, you know, it's what happens.
It's
Unless children are involved, which
God forbid.
Absolutely. Or a church.
right,
But I mean, there was a synagogue shot up in Pennsylvania. Nobody gave 2 shits about that.
right.
You know, there was a church down in South Carolina shot up. Nobody gave 2 shits. You know, everybody's like, oh,
And-
let's keep them in our prayers.
right.
Because
TNT.
you know what it means when somebody says they're going to pray for you. They're not going to do a damn thing else.
Right,
Is what-
right.
You know, so it's just become commonplace.
Yeah.
And
I got to slow down.
what we have to do is just not keep doing what we're doing because something's not working right.
Yeah. Now, I agree with you.
Wow. All right, let me put a show note down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, something has to happen on that front. But is that a commentary on media again, or is it?
No, it's our apathy. I
Okay.
think it's United
Yeah,
States
I
apathy.
think that's fair.
Because if it doesn't happen in our backyard, if it doesn't affect our house,
Right.
then we're apathetic about it. I mean, yeah, we're going to put a wristband on, or we're going to put on social media,
Yeah.
praying for Columbine or praying for the, you know, whatever victims of the Las Vegas shooting, whatever the case may be.
We're going to go have a memorial down here and burn ourselves with wax.
Yeah, and then we're not going to think about it again
Right.
because now we've cleaned our conscience.
Right. Right.
Instead of taking steps. And, you know, honestly, we even had politicians shot up in D.C. during a softball game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's happened to every walk of life, and it just doesn't seem to be getting any better. And that's the scariest thing, I think, moving forward,
Yeah.
is because I don't see that ending because I don't see us taking any steps, concrete steps, to reroute that.
Yeah, I'm thinking we might want to put a show on that. Just
That's a hard-
singularly,
And that's a hard
that.
show to keep lighthearted. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
I somehow think we'll figure it
I mean,
out.
we have that reach, but it's not going to be reverent. You know,
No,
I'm sorry.
No.
All right, so now we're going down another 25 years.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
God,
yes,
that's
yes.
fast now. All right.
So what are we? We're in the mid 90s at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So minus 25, and want to call it down to 75.
Gotcha.
1975 to mid 90s, because I don't know about James, but my 90s are kind of a blur. And most of the no, I was 9 in 75, 8. So,
Oh, math.
but back then, in the early part of that period, go ahead.
Before we go, we have to
He's
touch on
chewing
this
his
real
tongue
quick.
over there.
No. Y2K.
Yeah, we should talk about Y2K.
I mean,
well, but
we don't have to go into the depths of it. But the shit that people went through and put
Oh,
themselves
son.
through, the self-induced shit that they went through.
I was in the IT world, in
I
that
know. I mean,
time.
it's just crazy. And, you know, I don't want to go into religion, but it's one of those things that a lot of people are doing just in case. You know, and I think that's what people do with religion right now. They don't really believe that shit. They just go, well, just in case.
Some of us do,
Right,
but
just in case, I'm gonna go to church on Easter Sunday.
Right.
Just in case.
Oh, my God.
You know. So, and I remember people buying all the water and the rations and the bomb shelters that we were using in the 60s and
Yeah.
70s from the nuclear bomb.
We're
scares.
fashionable.
We're now going back in there. People doing air suits and all that. I mean, you know, I was amazed, and honestly, I didn't know enough about it to be all that worried. But I remember New Year's Eve that year went a whole lot better after that clock ticked and the lights were still on.
in Australia.
Yeah, and the stoplights were working and the street lights were on and I still had money in the bank. That was the last time I think I had money in the bank. It was the year of our Lord 2000.
I was working at a major university, working at a medical center, and we started in 1998 preparing for 2000. Every IV drop you know, that IV machine that pumps the shit into you. And every one of those, every elevator, every door lock, every piece of surgical equipment, heart-lung machines was a big deal. Every, every stepping out of that, talking with some of my IT buddies who were working at some automotive manufacturing places and other manufacturing places, every single robot had to have circuitry replaced. Every single production line had firmware changes that had to be done without interfering with production. I mean, this was a 2-year global effort.
I mean, I was in state government at the time, and I remember how we were trying to protect documents and things like that. Good thing of it was everything was still on paper, so we weren't going to lose a whole lot.
Right.
Now, if that were to happen today, that same scare would happen today. With as paperless as we've become, that would even be more of a fear, I think, than even was back then. Because we had that point, we had not become as dependent on computers as we are now. Now, my God, if that scare came out,
oh yeah.
I mean, it shuts down
and
the very structure of our world.
Speaking to your apathy point,
No, I'm not apathetic. I'm not apathy.
but you made the apathy
I
point.
got you.
Good Lord, it's like herding cats
I know,
in here.
I know.
So, but speaking to that, where everything, I had it was a business law professor. I don't know why I was in the course, but she was a genius. She said 90% of the population doesn't think beyond the tip of their nose. Nobody and she told this to the classroom. Nobody in this classroom right now is thinking about anything else except where the beer is coming from when you leave this room.
I don't know. I probably was sitting back here thinking about that girl's ass in front of me. Possibly that law professor's ass or that business
Yeah,
professor's
you would
ass.
have.
See,
Yeah, you would have.
I mean, I'm a pervert. I mean, I ain't thinking about no beer. I know how to find fucking beer.
But-
I need some trim.
But
And again, James Reeves, Facebook. Daddy needs some trim.
he's advertising. Great.
It's our first sponsor.
No, it's not.
Trim for James. Trim for James. Let's go out and get some trim for James.
Okay, yeah, honey, I'll be home in a minute.
Moving on to the
Yes.
next 25 years.
All right,
You're first.
So there's a lot going on back then. There was the after effect. We'll call it the afterglow, I guess, of that social revolution from the '60s.
I don't think it's an afterglow. I think they.
Oh, it was.
That's a hungover.
It was okay. Yeah,
hungover.
It was a hangover. Yeah, that's true. And then there's that whole Reagan era.
War on drugs.
Which part of the Reagan era?
Right. That's what I'm saying. The
Yeah.
war on drugs was
Yep.
I mean, because you're talking about the importing of cocaine for the first time during that era.
Yeah, in a huge way.
Absolutely.
Not
I mean,
just dudes walking across the border with suitcases. We had
jets
jets, exactly.
packed to the rim with cocaine.
We had political leaders in major cities in the Deep South, Miami, I'm thinking. And then we had the drug kingpins that actually run the show.
Do you consider Florida South?
Yes. Yes.
I
you
know
have to.
geographically they are, but if I look at Miami, I don't think of them as Deep South.
Well, and, I'm not from that part of the world.
That's like saying
And it's a cultural thing.
that's like
So-
saying Tucson is Deep South.
No, it's not.
It's the southern part. It's just as
But
southern.
it's west of the Mississippi. The South is encompassed by the Ohio River and the Mississippi River, Atlantic Ocean, Gulf of Mexico.
If you're
That's
looking
the
at
South.
a linear path,
I ain't looking linear.
Corpus
I'm looking
Christi,
geographic.
Texas is Deep South.
No. Texas is Texas. Any Texan listening's going to agree.
Fair. Tip of the cap to Texas. We don't want to piss you off
No.
because you will attack.
Yes, you will. And I don't want to have to kick your ass as a Kentuckian.
No. But yeah, I think you're seeing a whole lot of the Reagan, Bush. Mm-hmm. You're talking about 12 years of conservative regime out of 25. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to 8 more years.
Loosely conservative.
Yeah. But then you're going 8 years of Clinton, which was a big swing from that.
Yeah.
And because you went from the grandpa of Reagan and Reagan's prodigy in GW. And then
Accidental prodigy.
Nobody liked him. So,
Right.
and here comes a suave, smooth-talking Southerner that could spin a tale and also was brilliant
And he could do a lot of things with tails.
He
so I'm
could.
told.
Well, you know what? Tip the cap, or tip of whatever he put in there.
No, just
I
cigar,
mean,
whatever.
I'm a big cigar smoker, so I mean,
Oh,
I'd like to have
Here we go.
a beer with Bill. But but you saw a lot of that changing, and especially with drugs.
Yeah.
Because I mean, cocaine became a huge, and heroin
Mm-hmm.
to a lower level, determining factor on social classes and
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
and also pop culture in Studio 54 and things like that.
Miami
where-
Vice.
Yeah,
what
yeah.
came about from that era.
So it had a ripple effect all the way around.
Oh yeah. And another thing that we saw come to the public conscience, I think, was this whole terrorism thing. Now the Black September, the Munich Olympics, all that happened prior to this era, but the fallout from that really started to percolate up during the 75 to the early 90s with the PLO, with the Iran-Iraq war. It's all related there, and it just starts creeping into the American social conscience.
But do you think we paid attention until it hit us?
You see, that's what I was about to say. Today, we just talked about all this social media stuff. How would have all that stuff been treated with Twitter
Yeah.
in the mix?
Yeah.
I think the war on drugs never gets off the ground if Twitter is in that mix. If social media, Facebook is in that mix.
If there was a voice for a average person
right,
to become viral.
right,
And we failed to mention 9/11 in our previous decade.
right.
And that we don't want to not recognize
Well,
the impact of 9/11.
no,
But I
but-
think we're going to see in the previous 25 years what led up to
and
that to be able to be something, because honestly, it was the first time in my mind most Americans paid attention
well,
to terrorism.
that's where I was going with the
Yeah.
terrorism conversation.
Great minds.
And,
Great minds.
In 2001, we saw it blossom. We had ample opportunities in prior administrations to deal with the bin Laden problem, but
We fed the machine because we wanted them to do our dirty business.
exactly. And also in this 75 to the early 90s is the Afghanistan thing,
Right.
where we were arming and training these people. And you know what? International diplomacy. Tom Clancy, one of my favorite authors of all time, he, and amongst
Sir
his,
Tom Clancy.
Sir, was he? Was
I
he
don't
knighted?
know. I just
No,
did that
no,
because you
no,
always
no.
say Sir Elton John
Well, because Elton John was knighted.
or Sir Albert or Anthony Hopkins. Yeah.
Because he was knighted.
I think the Tom Clancy was too. In
No,
one of his
he was
books.
not.
In one of his books,
He
was.
should have been.
Yeah.
He should have been.
But I digress.
But Tom Clancy's an American boy, so we don't give a shit about those titles. But in one of his books, and forgive me, Tim, I can't remember which book it was, but he defined international diplomacy as two countries fucking each other, and that's what America has done since its founding, within reaching out to interfere with international affairs. And honestly, it's what every country does. That's a very good definition of
We
it.
just have more of a reach than others.
We do now.
Yeah.
We do now.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say at all, don't want to even insinuate that that's what led to 9/11. It was not.
Right.
It was not. But
And we could do an entire show on 9/11.
yeah, of course we could.
And honestly, it's probably never going to happen because it's just not. That's not what our show's about.
no. That's too deep, and then it also introduces a bunch of
Conspiracies
bullshit,
and
that's out
also a
there,
lot of
too.
emotion for
Yeah,
folks. And
yeah.
but yeah,
But it is certainly it's certainly worthy of mentioning any time, but particularly in this kind of timeline discussion. So yeah, that we saw that Iran-Iraq war, we saw all the PLO stuff going on.
the
and
one
Syria.
Iran-Iraq war, or haven't they been in war since I've been alive?
They've probably been at war since Christ was alive.
That's what I'm saying. Well, me and Kenny Loggins got a lot of similarities. But one of the things I want to mention that happened during this time, and I think you want to talk about a ripple effect, is the AIDS epidemic coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first exposure that I had to that, obviously, when Rock Hudson got AIDS, that was, I think, the first pop culture, time where everybody's like, well, Rock Hudson was a ladies' man. And come to find out,
Right.
and now we're starting to see that may have been one of the first times the tabloid stuff started surfacing, and it started dispelling that lore that some
Yeah.
of these Hollywood actors had. And but the first time it really came home to roost for me is I'd taken the day off work and I was taking a nap on my couch at home, and the phone rang. And back then we answered phones.
No caller ID.
And I answered the phone. I was in the middle of a nap. It was my buddy Lou, and I was pissed off because he called me on the fucking phone when I was taking a nap. And he goes, "Dude, have you watched the news today?" And I'm like, "No." I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Magic Johnson has AIDS." What's that AIDS again?
Yeah.
And at that time it was a death sentence.
Right.
And to see the evolution of that since, the late 70s, early 80s, and they got Freddie Mercury, you got a lot of folks, and during that time, you see a lot of people died of it. I mean, it was an epidemic.
Yeah.
And it changed sex from that point forward.
Absolutely. And in a lot of ways, it was kind of a rebirth of the sexual revolution of the next era we're going to get into, because at that point, there's a lot of arguments out there. I have yet to see hardcore proof of.
Well, you know
this.
what AIDS is? You know what that is? It's condemnation of them homosexuals.
Well,
It is. It's applied to the homosexual.
Yeah.
Oh! No, we don't believe
Step
that.
down,
Trust
preacher
me.
boy,
No,
step down.
trust me, we don't believe
No,
that shit.
no,
but
I don't.
that was perpetuated back then.
it was.
It was
And-
very
and-
vibrant in our area.
And it was, and there was a lot of discussion in the political classes that's why Reagan didn't give it any credence.
Or credence.
When it, or
not a word.
credence, whatever. But when these illnesses, these bizarre flus that nobody got over, these skin rashes that were unexplained,
Weight loss.
the severe weight loss, when all this started happening in that San Francisco community,
and Philadelphia and L.A.
yeah,
and New
yeah.
York, the larger metropolises.
that
Gotham.
and
Big into Gotham.
and Reagan did nothing.
Because he was the grandpa that made everybody want to feel like it was okay to go to bed at night.
And
And there may be something to that, but the whole time, people are sharing needles. People
Right.
are fucking other people randomly. And I think this may be an aftermath of the 60s and 70s where we sell the free love.
That's the
and
sexual revolution.
And the free
Yep.
drugs. It wasn't just sex.
Right.
It was the evolution of drugs.
yeah.
And I think you saw that
That's part of it, yeah.
that coming to roost in the late 70s,
With
early
that
80s.
bloodborne disease.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because the indiscriminate nature of those decades lended to, all right, something's got to stop this shit.
Yeah.
Because
And-
we went too far, and now something's going to have to stop it, and we got to go a different
And
direction.
I'm going to throw this out there, and James is going to lose his mind because
There's a
he does
chance.
this when I throw this shit out there. I'm not sure it had anything to do with those particular decades. I think as we continue to go backwards, we're going to see the same reckless behavior across the entire timeline that we're talking about.
Well, I mean, reckless behavior, that type of reckless behavior dates back to the Roman Empire.
Yep.
So, and I completely understand that degree in
He's
history.
learning. He's learning.
But it was
Degree in
never,
history.
it was never ever as rampant and as bold and outward as it was during that decade.
And why was that, do you think?
Why was it so welcomed out?
Why do we know that it was so rampant?
Well, I mean, I think the Vietnam War had a lot to do with why the love, the decade of love, because they were going out and protesting against a war, and they were going to the other extreme. Don't make war, make love,
And
type of stuff.
And everybody in America knew about it because it was on the evening news.
Well, and also I think that you're seeing protests and you're seeing set-ins and you're seeing events now that Woodstock. I mean, everybody looks back on the Woodstock, and that was one of the first times that you see music, sex, and drugs marriaged in a socially acceptable event.
And without national media, Nobody knows about Woodstock except upstate New York.
That's why Paul could kill all those people when he was Saul and go down 2 towns later and convert.
There's a
Because
couple of
there was
books written about that.
There was no social media
Right.
to warn the next city about what he had done prior to that.
And just for clarity, I'm not talking about social media. I'm talking about a national news presence,
But
whether that's radio or TV.
But at that point, that was social media back then. That was the way people got information.
Okay, back then we're talking about biblical times, and we're talking
No,
about
I'm
the late
actually talking
70s.
about the 70s and 80s.
Okay, right.
Newspapers, magazines,
right.
and social media. Walter Cronkite was the voice of the nation.
And
And it really started back in the Vietnam War, where you saw reporters actually going over there and filming and telecasting from there.
Right.
Radio shows taking place there.
where you heard the screams of the wounded
Right.
and you heard the rounds impact.
And it started rippling effect into the 70s, 80s,
Right.
where they were on the ground here at whatever event that was going on.
Do you remember?
I actually held my hand like I had a microphone.
He
There's
did.
literally
He
a
did.
microphone in front of my face. I didn't grab it.
I can't remember which fight it was. It was very
Boxing?
No.
Well, well, you said
This
fight.
is I know, but that's
I was thinking about the Thriller in Manila.
no. That is from that era though. It was a hell of a fight, wasn't it?
Well, I mean,
Do you remember
Muhammad-
watching that on TV?
Yes,
Oh, my
Muhammad
God.
Ali. Friday night was fight night. in
Yeah,
my
it
house.
was. Yeah, it was.
And I fell in love with Muhammad Ali
Yeah, it
because
did.
I'm a trash talker. And there was no better trash talker in the history
Ever.
of talking trash than him.
Ever.
And could back it up.
Yeah, and he did.
And you
that
also
night.
saw somebody, even at the age I was then, that had a social conscience that had not had that happen before ever. And to see how that was handled in Kentucky for somebody that started off as Cassius Clay, then upheld the philosophies of being a Muslim, and honestly did not go into the military for that, was very much a peace advocate, a social, you didn't see that. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was probably before him. And he was shunned when he went from Lou Alcindor to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was probably the guy that
Was he really before him?
Yes, because Jabbar went to Power Memorial High School in 1967. So it was quite a bit before
Okay, yeah.
before Muhammad.
It's effectively the same generation.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that was a huge event in Kentucky.
There's still a gold medal somewhere in the bottom of the Ohio River where Muhammad Ali threw his Olympic gold medal in the river.
Yeah, and being from Kentucky, I think we can both speak to the power that man had.
Even today.
Yeah, I mean his. I was lucky enough. I'm not an autograph seeker, never have been, but he was down in downtown Frankfort, and at that time I was working with mentally handicapped, physically disabled adults. I was in my early 20s, and they said Muhammad Ali is down in St. Clair Mall. So I said, can I go down and see him? And my boss said, well, you got to take one of the clients with you. So I grabbed the one in the wheelchair because he moves as fast as I move. So me and Don head down to the square. And there's not as many people around Muhammad as you would think. And at that point was when Parkinson's was really starting to come out in Muhammad. And I took Don up there, and of course, as soon as he saw the wheelchair, he parted the waters and came right toward us. And I think it was genuine. I don't think it was for publicity. There was no cameras
Right.
or anything like that. I think it was genuine. And he reached down and handed Don an autograph that was on Muslim literature. So all his autographs he were giving out that day was on Muslim literature. I thought it was brilliant because everybody wants the man's autograph.
Right.
So therefore, he is witnessing for his faith.
Right.
So he looked at me, and he did not speak directly to me because he used a handler. Because at that point, Parkinson's has gotten to where he did not want to slur his speech. And the handler goes, would you like an autograph? I'm like, no, sir. I said, I would love to shake his hand. And I reached out and I shook his hand. And I'm 6'2", I'm a decent sized guy.
He's a healthy boy.
But now he was about 6'2 and a half, 6'3". His hand wrapped around mine twice. And I got a big hand. And I'm like, I just shook the hand of the man that is known the world over.
Greatest boxer of all time.
Well, possibly the greatest athlete of all time.
Yeah.
The most famous athlete of all time.
Absolutely that.
And I think that was an era that went on during that time, too. I think sports were being more highly heralded during that time
Oh,
that
yeah.
had ever been happened before.
Oh, yeah.
When you're talking about baseball, NBA, when you're talking about Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, you had Olajuwon, you had Jabbar. I mean, you had all of those powers meeting in,
You
at
had
one time.
Joe Montana, John Elway, Dan Marino.
Absolutely.
All these guys.
Warren Moon.
Warren Moon.
Every team, Kenny Stabler.
Yeah.
Fran
Yeah.
Tarkenton was even in that era. I think he wore a skirt later. I'm not sure.
And oh my God, the great fight announcer.
Bob Cosell.
Yeah, Cosell. Howard.
Howard, not Bob.
Bob.
Random. Well, Bob was his.
You can blame that on the turkey.
Bob. Hello, everybody. This is Robert Cosell. So I think you saw a heyday of extremes
Yeah.
and the result of what happens when you go to an extreme. Maybe the extremes was probably more 60s, 70s because you saw extreme violence, you saw extreme love, and then you saw the results of that possibly going into the 80s and 90s.
I got some commentary on that. What do you say we step back another 25?
All right, I'm ready. So what are
So
we
this
into
is now 1950 to 1975.
I think it should be 44.
44 to 75. That's a bit longer than 25.
Yeah, it is. But we're only okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I know there's somebody going to be listening to this podcast going, these fuckers can't do reverse math
No,
at all.
no.
It's called subtraction.
It is called subtraction. It is called subtraction. But we're working the fuck out of this turkey rye.
Oh, Jesus.
And I don't want to think that hard.
All right.
So I'm jumping around by eras.
50 to 75.
50 to 75. That
Gotcha.
is an even 25 years.
All right. So you go.
Okay. So this is where the baby boomers actually started getting married, started having us, and making the economy explode out of that depression. There's, we can argue about the timing on this because, the war ends in 45, blah, 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 blah.
We're still talking about 50.
Yeah, we're going to glaze over some of that.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to start in 50 and say that's where it starts because Slightly Uncomfortable sets the fucking standard.
If you're looking for accurate information, wrong podcast.
Wrong podcast.
Wrong
podcast.
We're speaking in generalities in a basement with bourbon.
Exactly. If you want hardcore history, go talk to my buddy Dan
Dan
Carlin.
Carlin, he is fantastic. He was here the other night.
He was.
He's very long-winded though.
He is. And he can put some Weller away.
He can, and that some bitch will shut up for 4 hours.
I loved it. James fell asleep.
I did.
but-
I did.
So we're talking about baby boomers. We're talking about an explosion of music.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about. I think we could do music, just a last 100 years in music, and have an entire podcast on that.
We could have 2 or 3 shows.
The problem is we don't have any. Everything that we play is copyrighted, and we can't play it, so we would have to hum it.
I actually saw somebody doing gaming and playing music in the background, but they tagged it with the name of the song and who did it. Now, I want to research this a little bit.
we
but
are
they were
slightly
playing entire songs, but they were crediting it.
We are slightly uncomfortable. Well, we want to be fully legal.
Well, calm down.
Well, I don't have to drive home. That's
Well,
on you, fucker.
and you know what, man? I'm in the drunk driving thing's a separate thing. I don't do that.
No, he doesn't.
But if other than that, even with that,
That is not a sentence. That was
if you're not putting anyone in danger,
libertarian.
then there shouldn't be any problem.
All right, so we're not going to get into that wormhole.
Oh, but
We're now in 50 to 75.
okay. So now
So we're talking about First Man in Space.
talking about First Man in Space.
We're talking about Vietnam.
We're talking about Vietnam.
That's a whole lot.
We're talking about disco. I think we need to talk about
Because
disco.
when I think about First Man in Space, Vietnam, disco's in that trilogy.
We got to talk about. I mean, First Man in Space. We're talking about some great music to come out of that era. First Man in Space, 2 great American things to be celebrated. We got to talk about some dark shit. Vietnam's in there, and disco has to be in there.
That's very dark. I agree with you because
Yeah.
it was a very dark time.
It was a hellish time.
I mean, although I'm a huge Bee Gees fan,
I'm sorry.
I am. Bee Gees, There used to be a comedian, and God rest his soul, I love him to death.
I know where he's going.
And
One of his
And
his brother preachers.
and people tell me that I sound like him. It's not who you're talking about. It's Tim Wilson.
Oh yeah.
And I've been told my whole life as a young adult and an adult that I sound like Tim Wilson. And I would go see him. He used to travel the I-75 corridor. That was pretty much his path. And I loved him because he was a 100% Southerner.
Yep.
From Marietta, Georgia,
Unapologetic.
but also a brilliant guy. And he did not feed into that you might be a redneck,
No.
Larry the Cable Guy shit that
Right.
people use to perpetuate that stereotype. He actually had a very intelligent voice that also had that Southern drawl.
Yeah.
And I remember going to his first concert I saw of him, and he gets his guitar out and he starts, he said, anybody here a Bee Gees fan? And of course everybody's like, woo, woo. He goes, all right, now, you three right there, you three boys sitting there together. Fanny, be tender with my love on 2. 1, 2. And the guys were just sitting there stupefied. And he goes, all right, you must not have heard me. All right, Fanny, be tender. We're going 3. 1, 2, 3. And he goes, you some bitches don't know anything about the Bee Gees, do you? He goes, that's why you bastards ain't got no dates here.
That's right.
Because in my age, you didn't get laid unless you knew about the Bee Gees.
Oh my God.
And I mean, but
Yeah,
that era, I mean, you got Saturday Night Fever. That was the,
Oh yeah. That was
You
a standout movie.
and I will tell you that the first black woman I ever had a crush on was Donna Summer.
How could you not?
Oh my God, she was a Nubian queen. Mm-hmm. Oh
Just drop dead gorgeous.
Yes.
Just drop dead
yeah,
gorgeous.
and she is now dead. And I think she was still gorgeous at that time.
That kind of beauty don't wear
Oh
off.
my goodness. But I mean, so it went right from the 60s when you had Motown. Mm-hmm. And I think the Diana Ross and the Supremes, and they kind of leaned on over to being disco. You know, you saw a lot of them cross over.
And shit. Who
Just randomly throwing out profanities.
yeah.
My mind's not working.
Who are you talking to?
Diana Ross,
R-E-S-P-E-C-T.
that's Aretha Franklin.
Aretha Franklin came from this era as well.
Well, she started really in the 60s. She was,
That's in this era.
yeah,
But-
right, 50 to 75, yeah.
Yeah. And
So if you're talking about music,
yeah.
oh, that just
That's
sound
kinda
like I
what
was
we're
on
talking
the
about.
TV show Empire. All right, I don't know if y'all watch Empire, but every third word is, we're talking about the music.
But I talked about because I'm
You're going from Frankie Valli in
Right.
the Four Seasons all the way through fucking Bee Gees and Commodores and
and
then you also talk about rock. That's when the Dead started, the Stones.
yeah.
I mean, my God, you're talking about perennial rock stars.
and I mean, you go back that far back, you're talking about the Big Bopper, you're talking about Buddy Holly,
I don't know that the Big Bopper and the Beatles.
but
Chantilly lace and a pretty.
but they came from that.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
did come from that.
And we haven't even mentioned fucking Elvis.
Right.
When he recorded the first song at Sun Studios.
Oh,
I
my
want to
God.
say 1956. If
That-
I'm close.
Yeah.
If I'm not on it, and he was the Ed Sullivan Show and all that. He was the birth of rockabilly, especially, and the separation between country and rock.
And the frustration in that older class
Oh yeah,
that has grown in the rock and roll world.
Yeah.
Ever since.
yeah, and we still do it. Every generation says that our generation was the best, and these new people don't know what they're doing.
Right, but I think, and also we're, this was a era where TV became mainstream.
Sure.
So, seeing this guy
Well,
grab hold of a microphone and hip thrust into the microphone.
Well, and not only
sent
that-
grandma and mom over the edge. That grew up in the 30s.
He's a kid from Tennessee, so he has that Southern charm. He's got that boyish look, but also dashing, to look at. Had a swagger to him.
Oh yeah,
We hadn't seen that before because most people were standing behind the microphone strumming a guitar, and they really didn't move around a whole lot.
I would challenge you on that.
Well, I mean, you had the chubby checkers, you had, but they weren't him.
There's an underlying current to all of this, and I've just been waiting to dish this out that we haven't talked about yet. which was segregation, and the racial
Divide.
awakening of that era, because in 1950, the black folk did their black folk thing, and the white folk did the white folk thing. And there was hardcore, there was legalized segregation up until 63.
Well, the Civil Rights Act in
Right.
64.
Right,
Ended
right,
it
yeah.
officially.
It started crumbling in the early 60s.
Right.
But a lot of this really
But I think the
cool
stuff still
music,
happened afterwards.
Oh,
I mean,
and it continues.
you
It
know-
continues because they're stupid people.
Well, no, not only that, but I think, yes, it was the end of legalized segregation in 64, the Civil Rights Act.
Well,
but
when
when Sammy Davis was with the Rat Pack,
institutionalized,
when
yeah.
Sammy Davis was with the Rat Pack, he was still treated as the black guy.
Yeah.
He was. And when you look at you don't want to look any further than the roasts done on what was the Friars Club roasts.
Right.
Hosted by Dean Martin and,
Yeah.
and
all the guys.
yeah, and they made fun of fucking Wilt Chamberlain, who is 7'2", and told him, "Hey boy, go around and get my car."
Yep.
So that was after the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
But
And-
because they're laughing, and the black guys are told, "You need to laugh too, or you don't get on TV." Yeah, I think. But you saw the steps being taken, and you're right. I think Elvis may have been one of the first ones, to act like a black guy, but be a
Well,
white guy.
That's not where I was going so much as
That's where you should have went.
Of course it is.
Yes.
Of course it is. But the that bluesy Delta sound started leaching into the rest of society during this period.
The Memphis blues scene.
Exactly.
Yep.
And that southern black gospel essence of music.
Because
I don't even know a proper word to put
Well,
to
before then, you were talking about white cracker music
it. Right.
that was without emotion, without feeling,
And square.
really,
and
really instrumental.
Lawrence
very
Welkish.
yeah, but also, you talking about especially like bluegrass and stuff like that. The folks that did that in those instruments were artists.
Mm-hmm.
But then you had that touched on with the soul from Memphis and even the Bayou coming up.
That's it.
Then you definitely saw an influence that had not happened prior to that,
And-
because it had been pushed away. There was no money to be made in it in
Because
their mind, because they could not sell African American music
right.
at that time.
Right. They couldn't sell Robert Johnson,
Right.
Memphis Blues,
Right.
On,
Well, I think
on the
maybe-
radio because,
I think
or for touring because poor Robert's black guy.
And I think honestly, you see some Ray Charles bridging those gaps, because he was, and the reason why, and I hate to say it, the reason why he did it is it wasn't because he's black, because he's blind.
Right. But
And-
he could play the fuck out of that piano.
And he had that blues. And
Oh,
he,
yeah.
And he also was okay with playing the game because he wanted to make some money. So he really bridged those gaps. And you saw some Sam Cooke coming up, and Otis Redding. Then you started seeing the soul coming out in pop.
right.
And then it was we have lived. Root and I are both the same age. We have lived through the best music of all time.
I'm
In the-
close to agreeing with that.
In the 50 years that we have been alive, that is the best music of all time.
Nirvana was awesome, wasn't they? Pearl Jam.
I do like me some Pearl Jam.
I do love me some Pearl Jam. Yeah, there's a professor, a good friend of mine, Tom Martin, down at Eastern, who thinks Pearl Jam is the second coming.
That's every Eddie Vedder song.
I caught Eddie Vedder at Riverbend at Lollapalooza.
Yeah.
He jumped on. He ran from the stage down the pavilion main
You're the
aisle,
geek going,
climbed
I got
up
you.
there.
I got you, Eddie.
Yeah, well, it wasn't on purpose, but he landed on me, so I say I caught
Well,
him.
you are a. We could go all night on the music.
So yeah,
First Man in Space.
absolutely, and
That was when the space program.
actually got launched.
Yeah, and
Yep.
you heard a lot about it. I remember watching the moonwalk, and now even looking back on that, people are saying it's a conspiracy, never happened, and all
Yeah,
that sort of
fuck
shit.
them.
Bullshit. You all spend too much time in the basement. Wait a minute, we're in the basement, aren't we?
Yes, we are, but we don't have tinfoil on our heads.
Not yet. But
Not-
I was
well,
planning on that
the
for the
night's
next
young.
show.
The night's young.
I
Yeah.
think Alex was doing a tinfoil scarf.
Oh, he was.
He was talking about doing that. For
I
the
bet
next
it
show.
was sexy as fuck.
Now I'm uncomfortable.
That's what we're here for.
So, L.A. riots happened in 1962.
The Watts. Yeah, the Watts riots.
And I think that was one of the first times that we looked at the police as not necessarily being on our side.
I think that started with Martin Luther King at Selma.
Well, true, but I think
Bull Connor was not a nice man.
But very, very quickly in that era of the 60s,
Yeah.
when you saw an era of protest, of people starting to talk back toward the establishment, toward authority.
Yeah. And then that authority overreaching.
Yes,
in
and going too
response.
far with the
Yeah.
response.
Yeah.
And also, as you mentioned earlier, that it's now being filmed.
Yes.
Because before, it was my word against yours,
Mm-hmm.
and I win every time because I am white
Mm-hmm.
and I have authority, and you are not white and you don't have authority. Then it starts getting caught on tape.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we realize white has authority and they're overreaching.
Yep. There were, I'm sure there was more than one incident of what I'm about to speak to, but I think it was Oklahoma City. Was it Oklahoma City?
Well, what are you talking about?
I had
The
to go back
bombing?
and look. No.
Okay.
It was in this era, in this 50 to 75 era, early, when it may have been the prior. Anyway,
He's now talking to himself. There's two people in the basement. He's ruling out one of them,
I can have entire conversations with myself.
as he does.
And probably lose the argument.
He does.
It's tragic.
He does.
But a lot of these black communities, once we get through the 30s and the 40s, and these folks are coming back from World War II, and they're finding themselves empowered and realizing, if I 100% understood that they were just as equal as everybody else, but when you go kill people together, it solidifies that. So these,
But my dad served in World War II, and he served with African Americans. He served with gay people.
sure,
But it seems like when they came home, the segregation still remained.
right. The institutionalized segregation remained, but in the minds of those gay folks and those black folks,
I think it made them angrier.
a switch flipped.
I think it made them angrier
And-
because I can serve next to you. I can be in a foxhole with you. I can be in a bunker with
I can
you.
kill these Japs. I can kill these Germans just as good as you.
But
I can save
I
your
come
sorry
home
white ass.
and I can't come in your restaurant.
Right. And so at that point, these folks have a decision to make. Do they get angry and they react angrily, or do they beat them at their own game? And, oh man, there's a video out there. I don't know if it's on YouTube. It might be on Netflix somewhere. It's called Ring of Fire.
I fell into the burning ring of fire.
You are not. You're
down,
not Johnny
down,
Cash.
down.
Another great example of music from the era. But a lot of these black folk came back from that war experience and that emergence into this media world when TVs are everywhere. And they start thinking, I want some of that. I don't want to be a sharecropper anymore. So they start building their own businesses. And I really think it was Oklahoma City. Y'all chime in. Let me know. I'll put a 2-minute thing out on Facebook and probably just hit the feed here later this week. I'll get it sorted out and provide the video for it. But they, like Watts, like East St. Louis,
Man,
Like-
St. Louis has been a problem for a long time.
like West Louisville back in the day.
Well, hell, like Cincinnati.
Yeah.
One of the highest racially tensioned area in our.
And what you and I grew up, in these last 50 years, when we were kids, we grew up knowing that there were parts of town you didn't go in as a white boy, because that's where white boys go to disappear. I grew up in Lexington. I knew that you don't go to 3rd and DeWeese in Lexington unless you just want to get shot or stabbed.
One of the cool things that my dad did, and I didn't realize that he was that forward thinking when I was a kid, but I was 14, 15 years old and starting to play basketball. And, trying to play against some of the older kids, bigger kids. I had a little bit of a late start. He took me home one day from school. He rarely did Daddy pick me up. For some reason that day he did. And he took me over to the housing project in Frankfurt. At that time it was called Walter Todd. And I had gotten out of basketball practice, so I already had my gear on. He goes, I said, Daddy, why are we here? He said, well, this is where you're going to learn how to play basketball. He goes, those white boys at Franklin County High School ain't going to teach you a damn thing. He says, you're going to need to learn how to play from these guys. These are the best kids in the city. I'm like, but Daddy, these are all black kids. He goes, yep, you're going to shut your mouth. No matter what they say to you, you're going to listen. You're going to put up with every shit they do. You're going to learn how to play. Probably took me 3 days to get on the court. He did that for the next 3 days. And then I learned how to get on the court and I learned how to play. And they ended up being my friends. And that was probably the coolest thing that my dad ever did for me. Is he abolished that divide. Now, granted, these kids went to a different high school than I did. There was a line right there in my neighborhood, and but he'd abolished that divide, and he gave me something in common with folks that I had never really ever associated with before. Yeah. And to this day, I still feel completely comfortable in any area of town that I'm in, unless I feel just as bad in white trash neighborhoods as I do in impoverished any type of neighborhood. Bad shit goes on in those type of places.
Right.
You got to know how to get your ass out of there and not to go in there in the first place.
Right. So, all right. All that aside, we've talked about the music and we've talked about some personalities. The huge elephant in the room at this point we got to talk about the Vietnam War. This started out as a French war, and then it turned into an American war because that's kind of what we do. We go save the French's ass, and we tried our best. And the great American classic movie, Heartbreak Ridge,
Clint Eastwood, and The Gang, Mario Peoples. Come on. No, it's Mario Van Peebles.
Whatever.
All right, I don't know how well you know Mario.
How well do you know him?
Well, you called him fucking Mario, so I'm pretty certain you don't know him that well.
I think it was the last movie he was ever in. That's what I know.
Ever, because he just went away.
He just went away. But in that movie, they said America's, that particular crew was 0-1-1. And wow, how'd that happen? Clint.
He just had he blacked the fuck out.
I did. Well, I just blanked out on Clint Eastwood's character.
You want some more turkey?
I think I've had plenty. Thank you. But
I get that.
Gunny Highway.
I get that mixed up with Hamburger Hill.
Oh, entirely different movies.
Well, I know, but I still get them mixed up because they're war movies. I don't like them.
But
I don't like war movies.
But Heartbreak Ridge is a comedy.
I don't like war movies.
in my world, it's but anyway, that particular crew, it was Gunny Highway and his buddy, the sergeant major. They considered themselves 0-1-1 because they fought in both Korea and Vietnam. They considered Korea a tie. They considered Vietnam a loss. There is a hell of a lot to unpack from the Vietnam War. We know that during this era there was a fuck ton of demonstrations about this. We talked about the follow-on experience of that in
60s, 70s.
Yeah, in the 60s, 70s, even the 80s, that led on from that. I don't think we need to beat this up too much.
I mean, the thing of it is, the Vietnam War was the first that I can recall in history, war being really telecast.
Yeah.
Not all of it was. We understand that.
Enough
but it was the first media-based exposure of a war.
Yeah.
Before then, World War II, World War I, it was all by historians. The accounts of the people coming back and the secondhand information. But now you're actually seeing video of boots on the ground and the suffering that the people that were involved in this had to undergo. We even saw a television show made after it with being MASH.
MASH, yeah.
And
no, that was Korea.
That was Korean War. But I think that both of those wars had the same footprint in the sense that we're in a foreign land. We have no fucking idea what we're doing there. We don't have a purpose for being there. We're just told that we have to toe the line.
Right.
We have to man a post.
And
that was the first time that people saw, that soldiers had to worry about women and children as much as they did somebody holding a gun.
That's when
combat changed during the Korean and the
it
Vietnam
did.
War.
That the military historian in me is blowing up here, but again, we're not going to beat this up too much. I agree. That's when the average American saw
War.
what soldiers have seen since the dawn of time.
They saw war.
Right. They saw war in its rawest sense for whatever reason that those behaviors played out. God bless every last one of you sons of bitches that went to Vietnam wearing that pickle suit.
And I know a bunch of those guys now.
I do too.
And I see the ripple effect of what that war caused. And I think the bigger thing that we could talk about, and I know it's been mentioned, is what happens when those boys come home. And that was heinous, the way they were received, the way the world looked to them when they came back, because they were absolutely lost. They were trained to be a machine, and the shit that they saw, no human should ever have to see.
Well, and you know that's part of warfare too, and yes,
But they weren't trained for that. They weren't trained to see the shit. They weren't trained to be put in the position they were put in, where they didn't know the target.
No. I disagree because draftees in World War II are no different than draftees in 1964.
But those guys wore a uniform in World War II. The people these guys were shooting at were children.
But
They were just as scared of a child
Right.
and a pregnant woman, as they were a soldier.
the same
know what I'm
kind of but the same kind of nonsense went on in occupied France. Okay, this
That was a good pop.
It was a good
That was a good
pop.
pop.
It was a good pop. So, warfare always sucks. General Sherman was absolutely right because I love General Sherman. He was an awesome human being. But war is hell. And lest we grow too fond of it, that's the apocryphal finish of that from Robert E. Lee.
He's doing air quotes. He doesn't know those don't play well
I
on
said
a podcast.
apocryphal. That implies air quotes.
Well, then why do the air quotes?
Because I have to do the air quotes. So,
So I'll just need to start going, air quotes.
but I think a lot of these guys came back from what they thought was a genuinely purposeful experience in Vietnam.
And to be found by a society that thought
That
they were
Absolutely
monsters.
hated them for
They were
no
monsters.
reasons.
They were monsters.
Right.
And that's I think that's one of the darkest times
Absolutely.
that we should attribute ourselves as being Americans.
Yeah. I'm
And, I don't mind the protest songs by Creedence and stuff. I mean, there should always be a platform in which to protest
Hey.
government action. There should always be that voice, and that's one of the things we're founded on. However, when people have went out there and had their lives changed, not just their lives, but the lives of their families that they left, the lives of their wives, their children that they left, the lives of the children and wives and ancestors that they're going to
Ancestors?
Well, they're prodigies.
prodigies.
Yeah.
It's a wrong direction.
Well,
James.
I'm just saying we're going back and forth here. Fucker, I don't know. I've had bourbon. I've had whiskey. It's the best of times. It's the worst of times.
Now he's gone all Tolstoy on us. Come on.
But I mean, it wasn't just affecting them. It was infecting them for generations to come.
Yeah.
And now we still know Vietnam vets that are still affecting and still being affected by what they had to endure.
Absolutely.
And it's just really sad that we didn't take better care of the folks that came home than we did.
And if I can say,
And still, there's some issues with how we're taking care of the folks that came home back then.
and there's a lot of issues about how we're taking care of the folks that came back recently.
Right.
But that's another show.
That's a wormhole. We're not going to
that
go
is a
into.
wormhole.
So now we're going to go back another 25, the last 25, right?
The last 25 plus.
Oh God. Okay.
Because
I didn't prepare for the plus.
do we want to do 20? So we're
But
50.
But
No,
we
we can go back to 25.
No, we go back to 19. We're saying 100 years. So our math has betrayed us.
No,
we're going to go back
okay,
to
yeah.
19.
So really,
1919.
so from 50 to 1919,
That's right.
30 years. That's not bad.
It's 31.
That's a shit ton
Math.
of history right there.
Yeah.
So you want to start? On the front end or the back end?
I want to tell you what. I'll take either end. I've had fun.
No, that's what I hear.
I'll have
That's what
fun
I
with
hear.
both.
Listen up, ladies.
It's because of
James Reeves Facebook.
.net. I don't know what. I don't know what that. I don't know. .org. I now have an org. I teach.
He'll take it from either end,
I
ladies.
teach. Pitching, catching. It don't matter. I mean, there's just a whole lot of.
There's a bunch of stuff.
And,
in there.
and I don't want to get into the negatives, but there is a whole lot of hard events that took place during this span of time.
You want to laundry list it right quick, and then we'll hit
I,
them in order?
mean, I think we can. I mean, you've got the end of World War One.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the Great Depression. You have Prohibition.
You're skipping a bunch there.
Well, I am, but again, I'm not being detailed in it.
History
but,
degree, I think you've said more.
Well,
than
I'm just
once.
saying that. But you're in my mind. I think the Depression, because my dad has talked to me about what it looked like
Yeah.
being in the Depression. Also, Prohibition and all the political and socioeconomic things that went on around the Depression and Prohibition, both. I think they really were tied hand in hand. And then you're talking about the Holocaust. You're talking about Pearl Harbor. You're talking about World War II. I mean, my God, there are some of the darkest times, I think, in our history takes place during that 25-year span.
It was absolutely one of the darkest times in American history. Absolutely.
And there's not a whole lot, other than the resolve of the United States, there's not a whole lot of things to hang our hat on, other than our resolve, that we didn't get broken by
Yeah.
the list that we just spoken about.
Yeah.
Because it could have broken a whole lot of countries.
And I think we've seen that kind of thing break countries.
Absolutely. You talk about every great empire falls.
Right.
I think that could have been our fall.
That could have been one of our falls. You know, we're limiting this to 100 years in the past, so 1919 is the cutoff point. There's a lot of shit that happened before that was equally dark. But given this 100-year span, man, from
And we're-
1919 to 1950,
And we're also talking about a global situation, too.
Oh,
with,
yeah.
With being 2 world wars
well,
and the Holocaust.
one.
Well, the end of World War I
right,
and the Holocaust and World War II.
right.
Oh, my God. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know that you can talk about many events worldwide that are darker than the Holocaust because of the volume and the travesties that were laid on in that time. And it was just, we can't overstate it. It was just horrible.
Yeah.
Genocide.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another piece that I want to throw in there. During World War One, and the run up to World War One. So can I step back over 1919 a little bit? Can I go back to 1916 for just a second?
All right, 3 years, give or take.
3 years, give or
The way
take.
you're doing math, fucker. I mean, thank God you're paid for IT and not math.
I
But,
got
yeah,
computers for that shit.
he's rounding up evidently the whole fucking night.
Rounding up logarithmically.
Yes.
So, in the run up to World War One, the segregation problem was getting a little bit better. There was still all kinds of racial tension in the country, but
Well, and one of the positive things is Jackie Robinson in 1945 actually was the first African American baseball player to
Right.
sign in the
and who
Major
was
League
the
Baseball.
who was the commissioner that brought him to Major League Baseball at the time?
It was Charles Johnson,
Was
the guy that you mentioned earlier.
No,
I don't
it
know.
was not. It was not. It was
Happy Chandler
It was Happy Chandler
from the state of Kentucky.
from God's own Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Yep.
Yes. So yeah, there.
Sun shines bright
No.
on my Kentucky home.
No.
That was what he was famous for, singing the
No. God, you're ruining a perfectly good bit.
on my home.
Yeah, see, that's why he never sings. That's why James was never part of the Bee Gees. That right there.
home.
That right there. So, that was absolutely part of the resurgence of this desegregation effort. In the run up to World War One, a lot of these segregation efforts were already underway, but for whatever reason, when we sent troops over to fight in World War One, we resegregated everybody, and there was a God, I can't remember the number of the unit, but they were called the Harlem Hellfighters. They were brought back to resurgence with the Electronic Arts game BF1, Battlefield 1. It was a
I
year or
could
so
not be
ago.
more lost. Uh-huh.
But
Nerd alert.
But the Harlem Hellfighters was a African American unit of infantrymen that were sent to France as part of the American Expeditionary Force of World War One. And
You know, I'm just letting you go down this wormhole
because it's important.
No,
because it's important.
but I know I poo-poo you.
Vitally
I know
important.
I poo-poo you on
You
every
shit
other
on me all the
podcast.
time. Yeah, you do.
And you know what? I'm giving you 5 minutes right now. Go.
No, you're not. You've
it's
done
yours.
interrupted me.
No, but I'm saying from this point on, you got 5 minutes.
I'm not going to need 5 minutes now.
Oh.
So,
That's what she said.
oh, look at you. So the Harlem Hellfighters are sent with the American Expeditionary Force to Europe to fight in World War One, and they were left to unload trains, and they were left to reload trains, and they were left to unload that train and put it on another train. The French government saw these guys doing all this hard work and decided, we could probably use these guys on the front line. At that point, I think the unit name was the 349th New York, 349th Infantry Regiment, because there were no more
Like
state
I'm going
regiments.
to correct you.
Yeah, I thought you were looking it up.
No,
But no,
no.
he's Instagramming
Well,
people.
I'm just saying. I'm glossing over.
So-
I've had too much bourbon for
Would
this
you
much
just
information.
shut up?
Well, I'm just saying. You engaged me.
So this would have been 1917, 1918. It's within that 3-year span that James so graciously gave me.
You're welcome.
Yes. The French government saw these guys and said, we need you boys on the front. They put them on the front, and the Germans named them the Hellfighters. Now, I have to wonder if we had the social media aspect today, back then, how many of you folks listening knew somebody in the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, Air Force, whatever, that deployed on the war on terror that did not send pictures back on fucking Facebook or Instagram? It was ubiquitous. We all knew where everybody was. There was operation security concerns, absolutely. All the military personnel respected that, usually. But we all got pictures of the people in their fobs, or at the base at Kuwait, or at Bagram, or at Baghdad, or wherever. If that same capability was around in 1918, how long do you think segregation lasts? When these guys go out and they are kicking the ever-loving shit out of the Kaiser's army with French forces because American forces won't have them.
Well, I think, and I believe that's fair, but any time that you can release information about things, it's going to change history. Because it's a matter of, is it filtered information or is it factual or is it viral?
No,
And viral's not always factual.
right. And
It can be taken out of context, so it could go extremely wonderfully if they had the ability to put that information out, or it could go horribly wrong. Depends on who is viewing it and
That's
how
the
they were
outside
treating
thing,
it.
yeah.
So,
But the point that I'm making with all of this is, at some point, there was this breakdown in this racial. The hell are you doing?
I didn't hit the wrong button.
Apparently you did. It's,
I'm listening to our show.
he's listening to our show while we're doing
while
our
we're
show.
recording our show.
So the thing that really pains me about the early part of this last era that we're talking about is the breakdown of the advances, however limited, during that progressive era, the early 20th century, how much of that advance ended with the War Department's decision to not segregate forces? There were, I mean, at that, prior to, absolutely prior to the turn of the century, you know, in the very, very late 19th century, there were African Americans in Congress. It wasn't until that progressive era fully set in that this resegregation became a thing.
Well, I think that you've seen throughout the 100 years that we've talked about that there have been advancements and then there have been retreats.
Yeah, and that's the nature of history. That's the nature of human history.
You know, you go from, and not to get overly political, that is just that's a bourbon, that's a whiskey bottle. We don't need to let people wonder what that fucking sound was.
Oh, you loved it.
But, I mean, you're looking now all right, we had 8 years of our first African-American president.
Right.
And what did we do? We turned around and went and regressed. And I don't care what your affiliation is, but we went with somebody that was anti that.
Absolutely.
So I think that you've seen throughout our history is we go leaps and bounds forward until we're like, oh, fuck, we don't know what to do now, and we retreat. And we take it even, all right, you talked about, you know, when we're coming out of World War I, World War II starts, and then we get women working for the first time. They're in factories. They're doing the job that men have done forever, right?
Right.
And they're being empowered because now they're building shit. They're not cleaning. They're not cooking. They're building shit.
Right.
They're
And-
making decisions.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
it's not just, but they're showing brawn and brains.
Yeah.
Then that leads to prohibition because now we put them out and saying this is the no, that prohibition was before that.
Yeah. History degree. You need.
I've had bourbon. All right, I told you. If we had started at the bottom and worked our way up, I'd have been much better.
But it's better starting in the front and going backwards because I can watch you scratch your brow.
Oh, anyway.
Yeah,
So we have the women's suffrage. They're gaining to get rights, right? And they're gaining to get a
1920s.
voice. 1919, 1920, 1922. They get that voice, all right? Then World War II hits. And then they start not only to have a voice, they have a purpose.
Right.
And they have a purpose because they're feeding the machine.
Yep.
If it wasn't for the women at home feeding the machine, we would not have the resources that we end up having.
There's no bullets.
Right.
There's
So-
no tanks, no planes.
So then after that, now we've got men coming home that are the alphas that they were still when they left, and they're coming home to meet alphas
Yeah.
that are bigger and badder than they actually are because these alphas aren't necessarily as beaten down as the people coming down from World War II.
Check your levels because you're getting louder.
I'm getting wild.
Passionate.
I'm passionate.
All right. So yeah, I 100% agree with you. All of my great aunts were Rosie the Riveter. I've got this amazing picture of my great aunt Molly, who I loved her to death. I don't regret much in my life. If I have a regret, it is the fact that Molly was neither my wife nor Molly were ever healthy enough at the same time to meet. They would have loved each other, and hopefully one day they'll get back together. But Molly, on the week or month of her 90th birthday, she did a interview with the Ironton newspaper in Ironton, Ohio, where she talked about her Molly the Riveter, not Rosie, but Molly the Riveter experience. And I've got this great picture of her in that Rosie the Riveter pose.
That needs to be a framed.
Oh, it is I've scanned it about 7 times. I've got it on about 8 or 10 different storage platforms out there because I'm a geek and I can do that and you can't. So, you know.
Why you got to dog me out? What? I'm just sitting over here drinking some bourbon.
But, you know, I have to wonder how many marriages fell apart because of that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
And you know, you really can't blame the men because they left someone and came home to someone different. You can't blame the women because the guy that left came back differently.
right.
Same way in the Vietnam War. That's why a lot of marriages ended then because they left this young boy that was unscathed, comes back as a grizzled, hardened, troubled man.
Right.
War does shit that is a ripple effect that we don't even think about.
You know, and just military experience fucks you up. I don't care if you get shot at or not.
I wore camouflage one time,
Oh my God.
and that alone was troubling to me. I can't imagine what it's like in the field.
I did the Army thing. I went off to basic training. I was Kentucky National Guard and went off to basic training. Spent a couple of weeks in AIT. Had about a little over a year full service and had some issues, and then I came home.
It's cute that you think that those issues are over.
No, they're not.
He had
But-
some issues,
but-
like he solved them. No, he didn't. He didn't.
Well,
that's why he's in a fucking basement with me.
I'll tell you this. I came home. I never got shot at in anger. The worst experience I had in that whole thing was the stark terror of having Reynolds Army Airfield cut on me, thinking that they could fix allergies. Okay, that
You had an allergy-related PSD. PTSD. Sorry.
No, I'm not even going there.
Yeah.
I'm not even going there. But
But I mean, I think what we can suffice it to say is that this was the last era in my mind that true wars were fought.
right, but I need to finish. You let me finich. You let me.
That's what she said.
So I come back from my meager experience, and I've got friends who I'm part of that community that have felt that loss, right? And my meager experience doesn't even measure on the scale there. But me coming back from even just that little bit,
Changed you.
it
I mean, it does. I mean,
it changed me enough to make coming back to civilian life 3 or 4 months of a challenge.
Yeah.
You know, but because it's a different world. It's a different world. And if you join this thing, you go over there with a good mind, and you go to war, brother, when that balloon goes up, all fucking bets are off. And your only challenge out there is to come home and bring the guy on your right and your left back with you. That's all that matters.
my first ex-wife, her dad was. I've only had 2 ex-wives, but
that he can talk about.
For those
There's a
of
couple
you-
of lumps in the floor.
for those of you keeping score at home, but he was in the Air Force during Korea
Okay,
and had a little bit of a touch into Vietnam, but not much.
right. From 30,000 feet.
And he was military intelligence and was a major.
Okay,
So he was nothing to scoff at.
yeah, mid-level officer.
And his role in Korea was to be flown. He wanted to be a pilot. He didn't have the eyesight to be a pilot. So he just pretty much plotted air strikes.
Okay.
He would fly over, he would take photographs, and then he would go back and plot those. And there was actually a plane on display at Dayton Air Force Base of his plane that got shot. So he
wow.
received fire. So when my ex told me all about this, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, this is big time. And it was. Sincerely, it was big time. I met him. He could not dress himself because he had been so standardized through military practice. He had been told for 25 years what to wear, what time to be there. There was nothing left to his discretion other than his task, what he was programmed to do. The man could not dress himself after he got out of the military. When he retired,
As an officer.
yes, could
Wow.
not dress himself because he had been so programmed, so focused on his one task. Now, granted, that task had multiple ripple effects,
Right.
and he understood that. He was brilliant. He could watch Jeopardy, never miss a question. He was Alice Trebek without the cue cards. Never miss a question. So he's brilliant, but he couldn't dress himself because
Wow.
he had been part of a system that you didn't have to worry about that. Your clothes are ready. Your clothes are laid out. You know what to do. You know how to iron your clothes. You know how to get your clothes ready. That was robotic,
That's
but it's sad.
It's an interesting take from where I'm sitting. My frustration coming back, and I know from talking with buddies and friends of buddies and the community at large, that the frustration isn't so much that kind of thing as
He had no frustration in that. He would walk out in boxer shorts and a sweater.
So he just didn't give any fucks.
No, he had no frustration in it. None. That was not frustrating to him. It was just as a spectator watching him, I'm like, you're a high level military intelligence. Fucker, you can't dress yourself.
But
He went to the mall one time in cargo shorts and a dress shirt and a tie because that some bitch didn't know what to wear.
But did he not know what to wear, or did he just not give a shit?
He really, honestly, I don't know.
Because I know dudes in their 20s,
But it wasn't
late 20s,
it
coming
wasn't
back doing the same damn thing because they don't give a fuck.
It wasn't a cool version of that. I mean, it wasn't that
Well, they're not trying to be cool. They don't give a shit.
But I remember going to a conference with him, and he came out and goes, I have no idea how to match this. He really didn't know because he had just given way to that thought process. He had never really exerted mental energy into that part of his life. And when he needed to start doing that, he couldn't. It was, and that was not PTSD or anything like that. But I think you're talking about an organizational change because he had been part of a cult organization, whatever the case may be, that told you how to think, when to think, and what to think about for 25 years.
Yeah.
And then you're thrusted back into being
True, dude.
dad, grandpa, husband, and you don't know how to do that. And your wife looks at you and goes, well, let's go to the store. What the fuck do I wear to a store?
So you put on the dress shirt, the suit, the tie,
And sandals.
The dress. I like this guy.
I mean, honestly, I loved him.
Yeah.
I loved him. We were going to play racquetball one day.
Yeah.
Some bitch shows up in khakis and a sweatshirt,
Okay, rock on.
and he beat me.
Of course he did.
He had no idea where to hit the ball, so I had no idea how to predict. But I think what we're talking about here is a systematic programming of people,
yeah.
of humans, and then what happens to those people. And I'm not talking about just on the military side. We're programming women on the state side to say, all right, you need to fill up these gaps.
Well,
and when the guys come back, we don't need you for these gaps anymore.
We talked about briefly the Vietnam War last time. And we didn't go too much in depth on that. I think we should, but not in this show. Okay.
Yeah, because I've had too much whiskey.
For a variety of reasons.
I can't get you out of that wormhole. I'm going to just go over here and just lay down on the bed, let Brute talk.
No.
And then wake up at 2 a.m. and hear him say, and furthermore.
James and I will never share the same bedroom.
No,
that ain't happening.
No.
That ain't happening.
I call Small Spoon.
No, you don't.
Alex, you don't have anything to worry about. Lloyd, he's yours.
Oh, my God. Oh, yeah. No, son. You just, no.
He blushed again.
No.
All right, so,
but
the sad thing of it is, this generation that we're talking about, this 25-year, 28-year, because you can't do math, gap, is really highly influenced by war and the influence of war.
Well,
and the ramifications of war.
And a gender
And that's war.
conflagration.
No, that's war.
Well,
It's because at that point
it
you're
was brought about
redefining.
because of the war, but prior to 38, because if we don't
Well, the
blow this
suffrage
up,
started before that. The women started having a voice before that.
right? But it didn't strike everyone at home until World War II. Really, here in America, it was Pearl Harbor.
Well, and plus you got rid of a lot of the men, and the women had a stronger voice and a stronger responsibility.
And even
And then when they came back, then you're getting into the 40s, 50s, and 60s when women are going, "Fuck you, we're not going back."
Right.
to cooking and cleaning and shit like that.
I think, and this is really outside of my historical bailiwick, but I think that a lot of these, the average American woman, found a hell of a lot. Shut up. Found a hell of a lot of independence when they discovered that they could contribute to the same war effort that their husbands, boyfriends, brothers, sons were fighting.
Bottom line, they found out they could do what the men were doing, and
But-
they probably did it better.
They contributed to the same war effort.
And they could also do the stuff that they were doing before,
Right.
which the men either couldn't or
Would've-
wouldn't do.
Wouldn't do. Right. Right. Absolutely. So
They were empowered.
So you've got badass Rosie the Riveter in Detroit building fucking tanks and aircraft.
Really hot.
And
that shit. Those posters are
Yeah.
hot.
Oh, yeah.
They're hot.
And then Sergeant York coming back from, well, not Sergeant York, that was World War I.
Yeah.
But,
I even knew that.
yeah. but,
What the fuck is he talking about?
but the badass armor commander with the hat tipped of the movie Fury, right? So the Sergeant Armor Commander coming back, these two now have to reconcile that relationship.
And where does that land? Right, and it didn't land well.
Well, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
But what it did do was set the groundwork for that explosion of demands for equality in this modern era.
I think honestly, it's safe to say, and just leave it at that, the explosion.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're talking about wars, whether World War I, II, Korea, whatever,
There was a Vietnam in there. Yeah.
is
There's a Spanish American. I think there's a Civil War.
Civil.
Yeah.
We can go back to civil.
Yeah. There's an
When,
1812.
when it's over,
Then there's
there
a
is an
reservoir.
explosion that takes place
No.
when people come back.
Right.
The ones that don't come back and how you handle that. The ones that do come back, how they handle being re-emerged into society.
Yep.
The way their family unit looks. They left and they had an infant, and now they have a 10-year-old kid.
6-year-old probably.
Whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and the kid doesn't even know them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how did that person stay in communication with their family while they were gone? Were they diligent in their communication? Did the communication even make it to them, even if they were diligent?
Did it even exist?
You don't know.
Right.
So there is all sorts of dynamics that take place when you're talking about the end of a war, period.
And you know, one thing I've done throughout this show is,
Flail aimlessly,
well, but
drink.
that too.
Yeah.
But you know, we started at the front end.
He's now hitting the wall
and we've
for no reason.
And we've progressed to the back end.
Started at the bottom, now we're here.
At the front end of this, we had the social media, we had the instant communication and all that thing. And I mentioned it every step of the way. What would the technology and the capabilities that we have today, how would that influence whatever era we're talking about? And we've left that question kind of rhetorical. I want to reintroduce it in this case. If little Johnny that left as an 18-year-old
He's a
boy,
dirty fucker.
He
I
is
mean,
a
I've
dirty
heard all
fucker.
those jokes about little dirty Johnny.
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Some
yeah.
bitch, he is not right in the head.
If little Johnny at 18 leaves little Susie here in BFE, Kentucky, to go to war in World War II, and he does all his shit, and he comes back as Big Johnny, dirty grizzled Big Johnny.
That cannot sleep at night.
Well, let's say he can.
Well.
Let's say he went through all this. Let's say he did the Normandy invasion and he did all of these things, and it didn't impact him one bit, but it did make him understand what this human condition is about.
It also changed his perspective. Because when
absolutely.
you leave rural Kentucky and you see the world through a different perspective, because back then that perspective was carved out by what little television that you had. And what little, if you read a book, or
Not
whatever.
even television at that point.
But I mean, if you read a
rural
book,
Kentucky,
if you
yeah,
read
right.
a newspaper, whatever,
dime store novels,
right, radio, whatever
Right.
the case may be, and he comes back with a different perspective that in his mind, the people that he left, be it his parents, his wife, his children, they can't fathom.
Little Susie. Little Susie's 18 when he leaves her.
But Susie has parents. He has parents.
Oh, but
And he may have put a baby in her belly before he left.
But we're going to talk about little Susie too, because little Susie wants to contribute to the war just as much as little Johnny does. So little Susie up and goes to Detroit to be Rosie the Riveter, and
Susie, the Riveter.
Susie the Riveter.
I'm trying to
Correct.
follow you, but
Yeah,
you're changing
yeah,
fucking
that-
names.
that's true,
She
that's
took
true.
a pseudonym in Detroit.
Well, wouldn't you? I mean, come on.
I've went by Rosie before. I will again.
So little
Possibly later on tonight.
Susie / Rosie goes up to Detroit and because she wants to contribute to
tickled
this mess
myself.
too. But then she meets Joe up there in Detroit. Little Johnny comes home. Now we've got this whole other mix.
And that's called the 60s.
Well, right.
That's the triad.
But it starts in 45.
Yeah.
Because
But you know what? Honestly, though, doesn't that happen even today?
of course it does.
I mean, anytime there's a perspective change, somebody gets a promotion, somebody gets a degree, somebody gets a different position, whatever it is, and they leave the people that still looked at them in the same light that they were when they left, before they had that position, before they got that degree, before they whatever. And it comes back, and they don't know how to deal with them on that level
Right.
because they've changed. The people back home may not have changed.
Right.
And they're still looking at you as being little Johnny and little Susie. And now Susie's been in Detroit. You've been in Vietnam, Korea.
And-
you've been in Japan. You've been in Germany, whatever the case may be.
And with zero comms. I mean, you might get a letter once every 3 weeks.
Right.
And, there's no social media. There's no FaceTime. There's none of that shit.
Right.
Everybody's living their own lives.
And that's when the Dear John letter
yeah.
took place. Is that, hey, Johnny,
Yeah.
I met Bill
Or Jody.
or Carla. She's riveting next to me at the, So,
Right.
but I think what we've seen is in the last 100 years is not a lot of things have changed.
Because the human condition's always the human condition. Yeah. We're driven.
We have fixed a few things. I think we fixed polio. We fixed the measles.
We've come a hell of a long way in that racial problem.
Right.
And that gender problem.
Now, are we done? No. we're not.
Absolutely not.
And I think what we're looking at with AIDS now, I think it looks much different now
You know
than
what?
it does when it did when in 80 when it came out.
I saw an advertisement for a medication
Yep.
that claimed to destroy that virus down to a level that is impossible to detect
It
in
is
a
not
blood
just a
test.
claim.
I'm not challenging
It's
it.
an actual medication that will make your levels to the point to where you're not contagious anymore.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So we've went, and if Ronald Reagan had acknowledged that fucking disease when it came out, how many people's lives could have been saved by that technology and that cure coming out way before it has?
And amen. But I'm just damn glad we're here now.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So, but I mean, you look back, and I said this in a previous podcast. If you watch All in the Family, which cannot be aired now,
Right.
because you know what? I'm a liberal, and I know I'm called a snowflake.
Yeah, you fucking
No,
snowflake.
I will tell you what. Every political class are snowflakes because they get their fucking feelings hurt when somebody doesn't acknowledge their exact same mindset at all times.
Except for us libertarians, because we just don't give a fuck.
Well,
You do you. I'll do me.
Oh, it's
don't
cute. It's cute. that
don't
you,
hurt me. Don't steal my stuff.
and
We're
you
good.
only have two in your fucking party that you think are speaking of. So I don't really want to hear that fucking
we are
noise.
kind of passionate.
But if you look back on All in the Family, which should be aired now,
Oh yeah.
all right, they're talking about the same shit from 1974, 76 that we're talking about today. Nothing has fucking been fixed.
Nothing's been fixed.
Period.
No.
End of story.
No, not.
In fact, if anything, it's probably gotten worse. Now, not the racial tensions. I think with race, and granted, we're two white guys sitting in the basement,
Well,
and we're talking about race.
This just pinged in my head as you talked about white guys, because
He does like a white boy.
Donna, Alex with a scarf. Oh,
He's so
son.
white, he's clear.
I love me some alabaster. But James and I grew up in an era where racial divide meant black versus white.
Right.
Is that racial divide though really fixed? Not black versus white. Today the biggest problem is brown.
Yeah.
Or anything.
And we don't look at that as being racism now, but it is.
It is. It's absolutely
All right,
racist.
there's no difference in what was it? You'll have to help me. World War One, when World War II, Japanese containment camps, right?
Shh. He's on a roll.
Right? When the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor. Shh. He's on a roll. But is there a difference? You know?
Right. I mean, whether it's Mexicans, whether it's Muslims, whatever the case, we find a reason to hate people.
No, this is a sad statement, but it's sadly true that as a country, since our beginning, we have went out against people that don't have a voice.
Yeah.
Be it American Indians, all the way up through our history, we've always attacked those who don't have a voice.
Now,
because now, after the Civil Rights Act, and I'm not saying we're over with the African Americans. I'm not saying that
no,
that has been
we got a long
fixed.
way to go.
I'm not saying that at all. But they now have a voice that they never had before.
Right.
So you know what we've done?
I think we had a president
Yeah,
recently.
as Americans, we're like, let's pick on somebody else.
That's right. That's right.
So-
we
so-
got to find somebody else to fuck up.
Literally, we went from Indians, American Indians, all right, and then they couldn't fight back anymore. So we're like, this seems boring. So we won't
Right.
talk about them anymore. And then we moved on up. Japanese, oh well, they got a lot of money, and they're not. Move up from them, you know, and it seems like we pick on those, and this is sad. It's a sad statement, although true. We pick on those that don't have a voice. We just simply do. We did it with women, and they got a voice.
But at the same
we stopped.
time, there are other aspects of our American experience who push back against that. There were folks in
I mean, the vocal minority is always going to be there. And I get that, and I appreciate that.
and that's what drives this American ideal. It's always the minority that pushes forward the American ideal.
But I think the vocal majority,
Are the assholes.
yeah. And any time that the majority is negative, I have a hard time with it. You know what I'm
And
saying?
yeah, I get what you're
Because,
saying.
I mean, even if you're talking about Vietnam, you had Vietnam, and we all, I think, would agree that was a bad situation.
It
to
was a
ourselves
poor
in.
decision.
Yeah, yeah. But we had the vocal minority that was saying, this is fucking stupid. There's no purpose for us being there. And we're executing our soldiers over a premise that doesn't make sense.
Right. You never go fight France's war.
But the majority said, this is what we do. And then we've went up generation, and there has been, this doesn't make sense by the minority, but yet the majority is going, this is what we're going to do.
I take your point. I disagree slightly with your premise.
And I'm
so
going,
far as
I'm going
Vietnam
high level
goes.
here, but
yeah.
I mean, even now, we're talking about the Mexicans. We're talking about brown people.
Right.
I won't tell you what, I've been around a bunch of brown people in my life. They're the hardest working, most family based,
Yeah.
most faith based folks, and they are doing everything they can fucking do to stay here.
Yeah.
Guess what? We're not doing any of that
Or
because we don't have to.
or even trying to make it easier for them to stay.
We talked about the apathy. If somebody said that we had to jump through the hoops that they have to jump through to stay here,
Oh my God.
we'd be in fucking Canada.
I'd fuck that. I'd be down in some holler down in Powell
Right.
County.
So I'm just saying that I've always said that when I was talking about religion and stuff like that. I always respect the Mormons. I always respect the Jehovah's Witnesses. Because if somebody came to my church when I was preaching and said, what we need you to do is take 2 years out of your life and go work a mission, my church would be empty.
And James would be leading the charge out the fucking door.
Because we don't need that dedication. We don't
Right.
have to be dedicated like that.
Everybody wants the fluttering chest and the feel good.
If you ask for dedication, we leave.
Yeah.
That's sadly, at times, that can be the American way.
Yeah, yeah. But I
Ask for buy-in, ask for dedication, ask for boots on the ground. A lot of people leave.
but also a lot of people step up.
They do.
And
They do. And I'm not saying they don't, but
I-
that's a minority.
it It is, but only 3% of the American population at the time of Revolution picked up a weapon.
It's the American way.
It's always the 3%.
No, it's the American way.
It's always the 3%.
And, you know, we can hang our hat on all sorts of great things, and we should, and it's valid. But we can't poo-poo our history.
Wow.
In being that we have exploited people that don't have a voice our whole fucking history.
Well, and so is everybody else.
But that doesn't make it right.
It doesn't, but it's a human condition. It's not limited to America.
I don't know if it's a human condition if you're one of the ones being exploited.
Oh, well, of course not. Of course not. But it doesn't matter if it happens in America, or if it happens in England, or if it happens in Russia, or if it happens in India or
And
China or
if
Japan.
we look at those places, we think that we're better than them.
Well, we are.
But we do the same damn thing they do.
Of course we do. Of
And
course we do.
if we're talking about the last 100 years, that's the one thing that I can see in hindsight. And I did not think this prior to this podcast.
Well, you're welcome.
I did. But I mean, I never thought that, oh my God, look at who we've exploited over our history. And we're still doing it. We're building we're building walls instead of welcoming people.
No, well, we're talking about building walls.
Well, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's our main focus.
Right.
And
Because
instead of saying, you know what, our country's built on these folks. If you're bad people, we don't want you here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want the same thing for white people. If you're bad people, we don't want you here.
we're splitting that. I just want you to know.
We've killed this fucking bottle. All right.
That's all right. We're big boys.
So we need to finish up this podcast.
Yes, we do. And I'm glad you went down that road because that was kind of the target I was headed for.
You're welcome.
When I pitched this thing, you took a little bit of a darker path. But,
That's me.
But it's a valid path too.
Sadly.
Yeah, the American experience has always been about crushing the enemy. Sometimes we make up that enemy. Sometimes we choose that enemy. And as James so rightfully pointed out, at the time of our founding, that enemy was the people whose land we were encroaching on.
Yep.
And we
That
defeated
welcomed us
at times.
until we took them over.
At times they welcomed us.
Well, sure.
In the Northeast, those Delaware tribes,
You know, it's funny.
those
we do,
Iroquois tribes welcomed us.
but we do the same thing. We welcomed the Mexicans while we needed help with our crops.
we didn't at first.
No, but you know what? When we realized we don't get this tobacco in Kentucky unless we hire some Mexicans.
That changed.
And guess what
things.
happens?
They became our friends.
Yeah,
We gotta
until
get
they
them up
don't.
here. And
And
till
the
we're done
same
with them.
fucking people that hired the Mexicans to help with their crops voted in a way that kept those kids, those people, those men coming up from
And-
the
and-
southern borders.
And I threw the brakes on that a little bit ago, and you said it don't make it right, and you're dead on straight, correct. But I still maintain that this is a human condition. It's not an American experience. We happen to be humans in America, so we do the same damn thing. Us humans, we are two-legged, naked monkeys. That's really what we are at the end of the day.
That's you at your house with your
no,
bride.
dude. That's you. That's you. Trust me. That's you.
I know. Maybe me later. If y'all want to come over by the window,
You know, I talked a little bit about my military experience here, however brief it was, but all you fuckers who know where I'm coming from, you give James a football, this thing looks very familiar. I'm just going to leave it there.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, of course you don't.
And now I
But
feel
you
like
give
I'm being
James-
exploited.
You give James a
Now-
football,
now I'm-
and you know what it looks like.
Now I'm the American Indians. Now I'm the Japanese. Now I'm the Mexicans. I'm now being banished
See,
from Roots
right.
world.
I just demonstrated the average American over the span of history, and now James is the minority American over the span of
Yes,
history.
yes. I'm your bitch all of a sudden. It's my
But-
fucking house.
But eventually,
All right, I'm the Indians.
Well,
You
right.
come to my house.
uh-huh.
You brought me bourbon,
And-
you got me all liquored up, and you're taking the place over. You're taking it over.
I give a cultural reference that you do not understand.
I don't.
Right. So
Something about a football.
something about James and the football.
I don't know what. I'm more of a tight end than I am a running back.
But that is the history that and it's not just the American history. It's man's history, right?
But you know what? When
A larger community comes in, starts to impose a cultural set of values on a smaller community, and says adhere or you're now the enemy. Of course, you're not going to adhere because you've lived here all your life and you have a different set of values. So now I must kill you because you're a threat to me. That's happened here. It's happened in England. It's happened in Western Europe. It's happened in Eastern Europe. It's happened all over the planet. It is absolutely heinously wrong, and I'm hoping that in years forward we can develop this Federation of Planets idea where we can all just get along, and God forbid, people,
All right, so-
somebody please develop the transporter.
So my thing of that, and I'm not going to disagree with any of it.
And I'll clue you into the football thing in a minute.
No, I don't need to be because it seems stupid. My point in all this is, while I agree, is we established this country to be different, and we're not, and that's pitiful. At the end of the day, it's pitiful because we established this country to welcome all comers. Bring your weak, you're tired. That's how we established this country, and now
That's
we
not
are the
real, but that's later.
right. But now we are the opposite of that. That's pitiful
It is.
because we set ourselves to be apart, and now we're just like everybody else.
And now we're standing up borders for stupid reasons.
Right, we're building a wall.
Yeah.
China. I mean, we're built. That's my thing. Is you're right. It's human nature, but we set ourselves to be apart from that, and we aren't.
I'm here soon. We're going to have another show. I want to see if I can get a gentleman in here that James and I once worked with. James once worked with. I still work with. And he is a H-1B visa, H-1B, HB1, H.
You're just throwing out letters.
I am. This dude's
There was
from
like
India.
a HIPAA issue. I don't know what that is. I don't know.
It's not a HIPAA issue. But this guy's from India. He's one of the most brilliant database developers that I have ever known.
And you mentioned him in previous
I have,
podcasts,
I have.
and
I
I would love to talk to him.
I would love to get him in here, spend a show about immigration, but not about those brown people from down south. The immigration about all the other people who are kicking their ass to come here to provide a better life for themselves and their families and all that. But at the end of the day, I don't care if you're picking strawberries or writing SQL code. There's a reason that these folks want to come here, and there's value for having them here.
But if there's reason for them to come here and there's value to have them here, and all we do is exploit them and then throw them away, which is what we're doing, whether it be our coworker.
Are we really exploiting him though?
Yeah,
Are we?
because guess what? If he has to go home, he can't come back because we've used him.
but while he's here, he gets to choose his wage.
Sure.
So
Until he can't. It's fool's gold.
yeah, well, that's true.
It's
That's
fool's gold.
true.
Honestly, it's slavery. Come on in. We'll pay you. No, we'll pay you. But guess what? At the end of the day, you have nothing because you have to go back where you came from.
Yeah,
It's a high level, new defined.
I'm not. I can't go that far because my
Does he have a
my
voice?
history timeline goes back further than
Right,
this.
but does he have a voice in who he becomes
He
here
he has an absolute voice as to who he works for while he's here.
while he's here?
And
if he goes back, what is he?
That depends
He
on but that depends on when he goes back.
Here's the thing: is someone like this gentleman we're talking about. we should open up and welcome him because he makes our world better. What we are doing is we open up, exploit him, and send him the fuck back home because he threatens us.
Or
That's what we do.
or because he missed a deadline by 2 days.
He threatens us.
But that's not a threat. He just missed a deadline by 2 days, and our legal process is defined by dates. All right, so we're getting off the subject a little bit.
We?
No,
Root.
you really.
Of course. How stupid. Let's do all the things that you want to do.
In your house. You got to throw that out. Okay, so James and I are both equally passionate about this whole immigration debate thing.
You know, it is. And I think we really have a like mind on this.
We do.
And hopefully the folks that are listening to this show sharing that.
I hope so, but you know
Because
what?
if you don't, you're probably not listening to this show.
But if you don't have a like mind in
We
this,
still love you.
I want to hear about
No,
it.
we still love you.
Yeah.
I mean, because the one thing this show has shown is Root's a libertarian. I'm a liberal. Alex is a scarf wearing whatever, and Lloyd is a conservative.
Right.
But we have found a way to sit at a table,
Right.
have an amazing night,
Yep.
drink some bourbon, drink some whiskey, and have it just. That's what we need to do as a society: is figure out a way to sit at a table and agree on more than we disagree.
There's an emergency.
And we're
right
out.
now.
We're out of fucking rye.
We are out of rye whiskey. I think it's time for the Weller. I think you need to go upstairs, get the Weller 107.
Let me tell you what we
And-
don't
and
do.
we'll just come back
is we
down
never
and-
close with Weller. Ever. If you can't lead with Weller, you do not
can't close.
drink Weller. You do not drink Weller.
I think